Good evening, and welcome to Representative Cindy Ryu's virtual town hall. You may submit your question live via the comment section, so please submit your questions now, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. Before we begin answering questions, I'd like to open up the floor for some opening remarks. Rep. Ryu?
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this virtual town hall. As you know, we have been working really hard in Olympia the last month and a half. And as we are winding down, actually not quite winding down because we still have a lot of work to do, we did hold a in-person town hall this past Saturday. And I really would like to thank the Deputy Mayor of Montlake Terrace, Brian Wall, as well as Deputy Mayor of Shoreline, Evan Poby, for joining me. We had a wonderful conversation, as well as, I guess, on the way to solving some local problems, because even once our hour was done, I saw many people talking with each other, discussing with each other, and we made really good contacts with one another, as well as, of course, getting an update as to what has been happening in Olympia. One of the things that I was able to do was, because we received so many questions and worried inquiries about the federal overreach and keeping our community safe, that I was able to share how in the Washington State Democrats, especially in the House, how we were working on protecting Washingtonians. And so I would like to also, I wanted to cover the affordability for Washington families. So if I may, I would like to share with you some of the bills that we have passed from the House over to the Senate. Now, it is a bicameral exchange of bills. We are considering Senate bills at this time in the House. And of course, the senators, every time they come to testify to their own bills, we say, thank you so much. Would you go back to the Senate and hurry up and pass our bills? And so that's all in good humor. But one of the things that Representative Wallen introduced was House Bill 1078, which is improving pet insurance coverage, because we found that pet insurance policies were being canceled just when our pets were needing them as they got older and needed the veterinarian services. Another is Representative Berry's bill, House Bill 1155. It is banning non-compete agreements. If an employee is able to find a new job, especially once they're laid off, why should they be tied down and not able to work on what they have been very good at? The next one was trying to give financial relief from high energy costs. Representative Mena introduced House Bill 1903. All of these bills got majority vote or unanimous vote sometimes, and are being considered over in the Senate. The other chamber is what we call it. And then Representative Hill from Spokane, she introduced a bill that's establishing land banking authorities. As you know, we are trying to work on increasing housing supply. So I thought that was a good bill and good policy position for us to enable that. And everyone's worried about our children, youth. And so we considered a bill, House Bill 2159, but Senator Claire Wilson's bill, Senate Bill 5872, is what is the one that's moving, and that establishes the pre-K promise account through Senate Bill 5872. Representative Bronowski, he introduced House Bill 2242 to preserve access to preventive services. As you know, with the federal government basically saying the local states and local governments should take care of our people, we thought, I agreed with him, that we needed to preserve the access to preventive services, because it is much more, I think, much cheaper, less costly to prevent healthcare and other services rather than trying to fix them once patients reach the emergency room because they had no services. And then encouraging permanent supportive housing with Representative Peterson's House Bill 2266, including transition housing, indoor emergency housing, and indoor emergency shelters. Having been the Housing Committee Chair for 5 years before Representative Peterson stepped up, I know how important it is to keep people housed as long as we can, even if it means we might need to support them with their utility bills and other ways. Once they do become homeless, it is very expensive, minimum $35,000 per person. And these are old numbers. I'm sure it's much more expensive. And one particular person, she needed so much services for very poor quality of life. She was costing, let's say, about 200,000 in those days a few years ago. So I am sure it is much more expensive. And that all comes out of the taxes that we are spending the resources that we could be spending much more efficiently by preventing homelessness. Representative Farivar has also introduced, and this bill is moving, House Bill 2294, prohibiting the negative use restrictions on former grocery stores and pharmacies. Just next door to us in the 46 LD on Lake City Way, the long beloved, in my opinion, I used to go there as well. Fred Meyer closed because of business reasons. And what we found out was that because they have use restrictions, not allowing another grocery to step in, they could not open it so that the neighbors would have access to food and especially fresh produce. Representative Hall introduced, he's the brand new member from the 5th Legislative District, introduced House Bill 2296, and he is trying to expand access to solar panels and EV chargers, which obviously, as we are trying to transition to renewable energy, I thought that was a good way to approach it. And then, this is my bill, keeping insurance premiums manageable by combating insurance fraud. That my bill was House Bill 2394. It's going to be the Senate companion, Senator Lovick's Senate Bill 6031, that I am hoping we will adopt so that especially King County prosecutors can get ahead of fraudsters. And then going after wage theft and holding employers accountable, the bill from the Senate moved over, introduced by Senator Saldana, Senate Bill 6058, speeding up wage recovery efforts for workers. What I learned was that even after workers had given their hours, they were not getting paid many times. And so Representative Fossey introduced House Bill 2479, and I am hoping that moves this year. And then lastly, this is one question that we got a lot of from data centers. They obviously have been given a lot of tax benefits and even low energy rates. And we are literally running out of inadequacy as population increases, and we are shifting our carbon-based fuels over to electrifying as much of our vehicles and as possible. And so Representative Dolio introduced House Bill 2515, and that is to have the data centers pay the full cost and take on the risks of their electricity use rather than shifting those costs onto households and small businesses through our higher utility bills. And so I am hoping that many, if not all of these bills will pass so that we can continue to protect our Washingtonian families and with affordability of which is challenging in these days. And so with that, maybe I'll take a question and then I can give you more updates on what my bill and my own Committee of Technology, Economic Development, and Veterans Committee has been considering.
Wonderful. So to get started with our questions this evening, just as a reminder, you're watching a live virtual town hall event with your 32nd district representative, Cindy Ryu, and you can submit your questions in the comment section. Our first question is on taxing the rich or cutting services for the poor. So, which specific tax increases on the wealthy do you support, and which specific services for the poor would you cut to help balance the budget?
Yes, thank you for that question. I'm sure you have heard by now about the millionaire's tax. And just to set the record straight, it's not a tax on your assets. If you own a home and especially if you've paid it off, congratulations, number one. And many homes are at that $1 million value because of the appreciation of our homes. And yet, you are still challenged with affordability. So it's not a tax on your assets, but rather on people who are earning, or households who are earning more than $1 million a year. So it's not a tax on the first million, it's on the second million. And of course, I don't qualify. But if I were to qualify, and if my income was 2 million per year, my husband's a poor ordained minister of the Presbyterian Church, and so if we qualified by earning $2 million a year, then I'm sure we will figure out how to pay $99,000 of that towards paying for the services and schools. The most often heard requests from parents, as well as actually everyone, even people in business, they all recognize how our public schools, and especially the quality of our schools in Shoreline schools, of course, Edmond schools, as well as the Seattle schools, the more and the better we can serve our youth, the better it will be, of course, for their quality of life and their ability to be contributing members of the economy eventually. But even more than that, their quality of life obviously will be much better. And our businesses will thrive because then we will absolutely be able to be competitive and attractive for businesses, especially on the higher tech, I guess, sectors, such as, for instance, AI is becoming more and more prevalent. And so, in spite of whatever the high tech industry and companies are doing, we still need well educated youth and children. And so, definitely, I want to more fully fund education, public education, our common schools. Definitely support, as I mentioned, people, keep them in their homes as long as we can, because it's much more expensive and much more difficult once people become homeless, because then they are losing their stability, they won't have access to medical care, and then absolutely wrecks their mental health. And so I think I do support specific services such as mental health. And I know we heard a bill, the budget bill, where we are unfortunately in the situation of having to cut a lot of services, including Medicaid, occupational and physical therapy. And that will absolutely lead to higher costs down the line. But unfortunately, we have to balance the budget in the biennium, this biennium, as well as the next two more by another biennium. That's just a requirement on us that we must balance a budget. And so and then even the community colleges, the trustees, and as well as the president of Edmonds College, and also, of course, the Shoreline Community College president, they have all been asking, please restore the cuts that we made last year. Unfortunately, they are dipping into the reserves, and they are having to, of course, find efficiencies as much as they can, which they have been working on for quite a few years that I am aware of. So absolutely funding education, K through 12, preschool, early learning, and then, of course, beyond that, definitely to our local colleges. And we're not even talking about the University of Washington, and yet they are also facing challenges because we do have increasing enrollment, which is good, except we do not have out of state or foreign students, which during the Great Recession, they literally by paying their full fare, they saved our community colleges and actually the four-year colleges. And unfortunately, we don't have that situation because people are not able to travel in, or even if they do want to study here, they are holding back. So I hope that answers the question that Megan just posed for me.
Yes, and Rep. Ryu, there's actually kind of a bit of a follow-up question on that from someone in the chat. They ask, what else besides the millionaire's tax is being looked at to raise revenue?
There are a couple others. I don't remember exactly what the status is because there's a few more days left until, anyway, in appropriations, we are meeting long hours the next 2 days. And then I believe one more day on Monday, long day. So we will see which bills move out of Finance Committee because in the Senate, it's just one appropriations, one Ways and Means. In the House, we have bifurcated because there was so much work to do. So we have the appropriations, which is the spending side, who gets and which programs at how much and in what manner, which is the one of the committees I serve on. And the other committee, which I used to serve on, which is the Finance Committee, which is the Revenue Generating Committee. Finance Committee also has long hours. They also had long lines that I checked this morning. And so we will see, but I probably have signed on to some of them. And if it gets through the Finance Committee, and of course, after a very robust conversation in our caucus, as well as, of course, on the floor, I most likely will be able to support it as long as it is not a regressive tax.
Great, thank you so much. We're now going to go to another pre-submitted question. This one is, where do you stand on protecting LGBTQ plus rights?
Yes, I am learning a lot, especially with the conversations happening, of course, on campus as well as off campus. And my take is this: I support LGBTQ issues, as well as, of course, especially access to services and especially healthcare, because many of them, just like every other youth, especially young people, they have had a very rough few years. And so I think we need to approach all include all from the our values point of view. How would I want to be treated as a woman, as an immigrant, as a person of color, as having been challenged with housing in my early youth days, and having limited food. Just like that, they have even more challenges, and even in housing, healthcare, definitely. I think I already mentioned that. So I think we need to approach their issues just like we would approach from inclusiveness, from and as a Christian myself and wife of a Christian minister, what would Jesus do? And the lessons from the Bible, like number one, of course, love God, but also love your neighbors as you love yourself. And so I am approaching it that way. We do fortunately have leaders within the legislature, and especially my former vice chair, Representative Nicole Macri, and I lean on her a lot. We serve on appropriations together, as she's a vice chair of appropriations. And when I was working on housing issues, she knew so much that I ended up sending her to negotiate with the Republicans on the housing policies. And we've made a lot of progress in that front in those days. And I know she continues to do that. And also on the LGBTQ issues. And so, so we have, I will be supporting their efforts, as well as, of course, be supporting any policy decisions that they recommend. And we always have very robust discussions within the Democratic caucus. And as I mentioned, of course, also on the floor. So I am an ally. I may not be an expert, as I mentioned, I'm learning more and more each day and approaching it, I think, from the community values. We want to strengthen our community, including everyone, whether it is gender-based, orientation-based, or class-based. I think as long as we treat one another with respect and love one another, I think we will go a long ways together.
What a wonderful sentiment, Raphael.
Thank you.
We're now going to go to another question. This one is on PERS and TERS. So PERS and TERS did not get an automatic cost of living increase. Has that been budgeted? How will you vote on that?
When I have to preface everything with when we can afford it. Unfortunately, as you all know, last year was a challenging year where we raised taxes, regressive taxes, unfortunately, and did significant cuts to programs. And we are faced with not as big, but this is a supplemental budget year. And so everything, just like what I had to tell the community colleges, unfortunately, you're going to have to dip into your reserves. And I know, especially PERS and TERS 1, retirees, some of them are still working, but those who retired a long time ago, I know absolutely inflation has eaten into your retirement funds. And so it is very difficult for a lot of you. And unfortunately, unless and until we can start collecting on the millionaire's tax, which is the income tax, I will be honest about that, which won't happen for a few years. And unless our other numbers go up from the perspective of our revenues from the regressive taxes, such as excise taxes, sales taxes, and so on, and our case numbers go down, which means the needs of Washingtonians go down, which I am not holding my breath on because these are difficult times. We really cannot afford to give automatic raises. I think in the past we've done year by year, which meant you had to come back every single year to ask for it. And then sometimes we gave it when we could afford it, and other times we could not. I don't think we are doing it this year, but I could be wrong. I didn't read every single page of the 1,000-page document because some of it is about last year, and then some of it, a lot more of it is from last year, and a few of it is from this year's changes. So email me, please, and we'll look into that particular section, and I have people I can ask who are literally experts among my fellow legislators, such as Chair Tim Ormsby from Spokane.
Great, thank you so much. Just as a reminder for those tuning in, you're watching a live virtual town hall event with your 32nd District Representative, Cindy Ryu. And you can submit your questions in the comment section. I'm actually going to just read you a statement that somebody shared in the comment section. Senate Bill 6200 allows tenants to install cooling systems to protect from extreme heat events, life-saving for at-risk individuals. Please do what you can to help pass this bill.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. We could not have imagined a few years ago that we would have 90-plus-degree weather for many days. I mean, at the most, I remember high 80s, and those would be for just a few days. And then, of course, a few years ago, we had 100 degrees, which is above our body temperature, and we cannot survive in that kind of environment. We're pretty fragile. We don't have thick skins or thick shells, and so absolutely we have to be able to install cooling units, even if it's just for one room. I know a lot of people imagine those to be the external air conditioners, but fortunately, technology has come a long ways where there are units that can reside within the unit, and then with a tiny little vent about yay big. You can tell I actually looked into it myself, and there's actually a store in in Linwood at the corner of 44th and 196, just to the east of it at the southeast corner, that actually will make a nice plastic plexiglass. I guess it's not plastic. Anyway, plexiglass with a cutout that absolutely fits your vent. And then it does cost a little bit, but it's not more than a couple $100 depending on the size of the opening. And then you can hook up the internal unit, and some of them can cool up to, I believe, quite a few hundred square feet, anywhere from just one room to 700-800 square feet. Very efficient. They can do both heating and cooling, one of them anyway. And that's the one I got. And very efficient electrical use, and so it doesn't pose any danger, especially when you're not hanging it on the outside of your windows, because those old days in the 70s and so on, the old buildings, you would see air conditioners just hanging out there. And if you're going to do that, please don't do it yourself. I would never ask my husband to do that because, number one, liability issues if it were to ever drop on anybody. Number two, I don't want my husband to be hanging out, or trying to do it on a second story window. So be careful if you're doing an external, but you absolutely have options. And that's absolutely what I will be, if I'm sure they've already addressed it in Senate Bill 6200, but I will absolutely be supporting that because we must be able to cool or stay not necessarily comfortable, but definitely safe in our own homes, especially when we can't open windows because sometimes we get sucked in with smoke.
Very true, especially that one summer when the temperatures got so high. It was also the summer of a lot of fires.
Yeah.
Okay. So just as a reminder, you're watching a live virtual town hall event with Representative Cindy Ryu, and you can ask your question by submitting it in the comments. Now going to go to a question from Rachel Roberts, who just wants to ask you about spending of the Climate Commitment Act money. They say, I'm concerned about proposals to spend those dollars elsewhere. What programs and projects are you prioritizing with these climate dollars?
Yeah. So before the CCA funding was available, we were spending general fund to weatherize homes, especially people who could not afford to do it themselves. And so absolutely easy answer on what we should be using the CCA funding on. Obviously, we also should be electrifying as much as we can, especially when we can get efficient, whether it's heating or cooling, as I was mentioning about the cooling units that are inside the unit, and you can roll them out to use them, or just keep them like I do between my recliner, between my husband and my recliner. So it's just a matter of hooking it up and then taking it down after the summer's over. So I think those types of efficiencies and especially to electrify as much as we can, are really good ways of spending the CCA money. And we hopefully, eventually it won't be as big of an income as we are charging people as they use coal-based, as they are starting to wean off of the carbon-based fuel sources. But in the meantime, I think I am prioritizing those very adjacent ways of helping people transition and be much more affordable utilities. And then along with that bill, to make sure that the data centers carry their own weight and not depend on us and the rest of the utility ratepayers to be subsidizing them. And so I do believe we are borrowing from the CCA funding just because we have to do that balancing of a budget. And eventually we are counting on the millionaire's tax eventually I think after the 4-year outlook period, that we must balance the budget to replenish that funding.
Great. Thank you so much. Just as a reminder, you're watching a live virtual town hall with Representative Cindy Ryu, and you can submit your questions in the comments section. Our next question is on housing and homelessness. Homelessness continues to be a problem. What are you doing to get more housing built?
Yes. Obviously, Representative Macri and I did a lot of work for the 5 years that we were together on the Housing Committee. And since then, Representative Peterson has been leading a fine group of legislators to come up with many supply side, because Representative Macri and I worked a lot on the tenant side of things. And then we were able to have such as surplus property that the governments owned. We could not even surplus them, but we changed the law so that we could surplus them for housing and associated social services purposes at either a discounted rate or even for free. So that and those were only for agencies, nonprofits, and governments, of course. And then since then, they've built a lot on what we started out with to increase the supply side of things. And I think the latest, and some of them we had to preempt local governments. And I know it is not popular to tell cities what to do, but cities like Shoreline, we were being where I used to be mayor, had the privilege of being mayor just for one term. But Shoreline was doing great, especially once we got the 2 light rail stations. Montlake Terrace, they had been working really hard to build more housing units. Same thing with Linwood. Once those, as people knew those 4 light rail stations were going in, even the for-profit builders, as well as, of course, affordable unit builders, they got going, and it takes a while to get permitted to acquire the land, to get the permits and get all the financing together and then build. And so you will, if you've taken the light rail anywhere up and down the 32nd legislative district, you will absolutely see the new increased housing units that are there. And so that's part of that continuum of housing. As we increase the availability of units, then hopefully we're not, what we used to do was, as more and more workers, especially highly paid workers, were coming into the state, they were basically bumping people down as they were able to afford to pay more. And then the other people would have to downsize and so on. And then people were being bumped off the housing ladder, let's say, if you want a visual. And so that's where we are trying to, because once they get off the being housed, then it becomes expensive. The quality life is awful. Everybody hates it. And some people say just give them a bus ticket and send them elsewhere. That's not going to be addressing the housing crisis or the homelessness crisis. And so we've been working on, of course, providing services and providing shelters, but we are also at the same time working on making sure there's more supplies. And so one of the things that we had to basically tell the cities to do is, if a property owner wants to build ADUs, either attached or detached dwelling units, let them do that. And so we are increasing those numbers. And if they are willing to do more extra units, then they are, especially if they're within walking distance of the light rail stations and so on, they get bonuses. They could go up higher, add a couple more units and so on. So we are doing a lot of infill, especially on the Seattle side, as well as, of course, other cities, both in Snohomish County and King County. We absolutely can take on more units, especially if the homeowner, the landowner wants to build. We're not mandating that they build, but if they want to, why not allow them to build?
Great, thank you so much. Just as a reminder, you're tuning in to a live virtual town hall event with your 32nd District Representative Cindy Ryu, and you can submit your question in the comment section. Let's see, now have a live question on K-12 education. So Other legislators in the 32nd have drafted legislation to support basic K-12 education funding gaps. What have you done this session to protect K-12 education?
Yes. As I mentioned, we have legislators who are champions and very knowledgeable about our K through 12 education system, especially Representative Santos in the 37th legislative district and Representative Berquist, who's the chair of the early learning, and even Representative Jerry Paulette. And I serve, not Representative Santos, but I serve because she does all the policy side of education. So the rest of us serve on appropriations, and we have absolutely been joined at the hips to make sure we protect as much of the funding as possible. And so on the appropriation side, we have been discussing for many years now, and I've been serving on appropriations committee for 8 years on how do we more fully fund education. And so even if I am not drafting those bills because I'm busy drafting other bills like AI regulation bills and helping other people pass their bills as the committee chair. And so I am absolutely working hand in hand with other legislators who know much more about it, and they're going and sitting on those two committees for pre-K through 12 and then even the higher ed to make sure that we are getting the right policies enacted as well as, of course, funded as fully as we can. And that millionaire's tax will go a long ways in us getting closer to fully funding education eventually.
Great, thank you so much. Our next question is on public safety. How is the state balancing investments in public safety with prevention, behavioral health, and community services?
Yes. Thank you for that question. Absolutely. This is where, even though we have the Public Safety Committee, and I know one of my seatmates is serving on that, and then there are a whole bunch of other issues that basically provides that connective tissue, I would say. For instance, the early learning committee have dealt with juvenile justice issues this year. Unfortunately, we did not pass that bill. And then, of course, the K through 12 also has a lot of that underpinning of public safety by making sure our youth are thriving within the public school system and of course having guidance counselors, mental health availability, and of course make sure that they are fed well, because that support of making sure that they are learning as well as thriving from the mental health perspective, and of course physical health too, and even recess. We know how important recess is, having been a kid once a long time ago. But all of that is very important to making sure we have public safety, but also that we keep as many of our youth um, uh, constructively engaged, I guess is the best way to put it. But also we have the business community that are able to provide jobs. So that workforce training aspect of education, but also the unions that are providing apprenticeships and community colleges and so on, so that as people are more gainfully employed and making a living for themselves, of course, that's a really good feedback to keep them basically out of trouble, I would say. And then there are other, such as regulations, business regulations. For instance, my bill on copper wire theft. As the cost of copper goes up, the copper wire thefts increased. Unfortunately, Washington State is one of the highest incidences, even more than California, is what I understood. And so I introduced a bill to make sure that the recyclers, they're not buying stolen copper wire. Unfortunately, that bill did not pass, and neither did Senator Olwell's infrastructure vandalism and theft bill. And so I'll continue to work on that bill for next year so that we can make sure that people are not stealing copper wires and interrupting services and costing utilities and transportation networks and even charging stations get hit over and over again. And so just like catalytic converter thefts that we were able to basically tamp down quite a bit by making sure at the supply chain side of it, we clamped it down so there wasn't a market for stolen catalytic converters. So I want to do the same with copper wire theft. If we reduce the people willing to buy stolen wires, hopefully people are not stealing them, but hopefully go and find somewhere where they can earn a living much better than by basically increasing not just crime, but also increasing the cost of living for the rest of us.
Great, thank you so much. Just as a reminder to everybody tuning in, you're watching a live virtual town hall event with Representative Cindy Ryu, and you can submit a question in the comment section. Our next question is about, are you supporting the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights and Farm Worker Labor Rights bills?
Yes, I am. Absolutely. Domestic workers and farm workers, unfortunately, are not paid that well. And if you remember back when Christine Gregoire was governor and the apple pickers were not able to come to Washington State because a lot of them were migrant workers, she even had some prisoners go and work in the fields, and many of them gave up even before they finished the day's work, even with the promise of a nice, pay. And so the work they do is tough, and yet they get underpaid. And so absolutely, I support those bills.
Great, thank you so much. We're now going to go to a question on the budgets. So budgets were released this week. What can we expect for investments in the 32nd district?
Yes, obviously capital budget is very limited. Transportation budget has been limited. Last year, all we could do really was to delay projects, and I don't think we canceled any transportation projects that were in the pipeline, but because the cost had increased anywhere from 30% to 70%, and I think one project was 100% increase in cost from best engineers' estimates. So transportation absolutely has been a problem. And we even had to put in $1.7 million because of copper wire theft from the charging stations that we spent so much money on to make sure that they're more reliable. And on the capital budget side, we were limited to just one submission. And my submission was that the Montlake Terrace Library has a leaky roof. And fortunately, the city council, when Mayor Kyoko Matsumoto Wright was mayor, she made sure that they had done everything they could using federal and all the other money. So they just needed the final, I think it was 300,000. So that was my one and only ask that I asked for. So you can look forward to hopefully that's approved and fully. And so hopefully you won't have a leaky roof anymore at the library. And I love libraries, by the way.
I love them as well. So now I'm going to go to a question I think that would give you a great opportunity to comment a bit about some of the bills you've been working on in your committee. Are there any bills to regulate AI? It feels like things are moving quickly and getting out of hand fast.
Yes, absolutely. So my committee, which is Technology, Economic Development, and Veterans Committee, finally got most of the technology bills, such as AI regulations. So the most likely bill that will pass in the form that we worked on and introduced of course, we had to improve it quite a bit. But Representative Lisa Callan, her bill, House Bill 2225, is the companion chatbot, which is powered by AI. We heard it, we worked it really hard, and it's now over in the Senate. And her companion bill from Senator Wellman is also in my committee. So we literally executed out of committee today. Yes, I think we did that today. 7 amendments on it, and lots of yays and nays. But I wanted to make sure both bills were moving, because sometimes you never know at the last minute or last half day. Sometimes there's a crisis, and then we run out of time, either in the House or in the Senate. Much more often in the House than in the Senate. But I wanted to make sure, and I told the basically Senator Sharon Shoemake, who's my who's the tech committee chair in the Senate, that I wanted both bills to look exactly alike, so that they are ready, and so that we can, of course, protect everyone. If it's a chatbot pretending to be a human, because I think adults, many of us, hopefully can make that judgment call that yes, this is not a human, even though I am falling in love with this chatbot. Apparently, young people have been told by their beloved chatbots that don't tell mom, don't tell dad, instead go out with me to the woods. And people who have lost their children to suicide, 14, 16 and 18-year-old, for those 3, they were boys. And so one of the moms tried to recreate the chat he must have had, because of course she couldn't recover it. But after the fact, it's too late. And so when it's an adult, for anybody, it must have disclosure that I am not a human. And then when they are being used by to the best of the deployers, the website or the chatbot user, or the service provider, they must, if they have knowledge that the person is underage, then they must do a lot more, and so. If it's about suicidal ideation, or other self-harm language, then they have to be blocked. And so we needed to be very careful about First Amendment rights versus being able to regulate to protect children, so that they would be able to have notices that, hey, reality check, basically. I'm not a human. And if you're having these difficulties, you should literally, it's so opposite of what had been happening. You should check in with a responsible adult and try to get help elsewhere, right? And so I have really high hopes for House Bill 2225. Another bill that passed out of the House after about 3 years of Representative Shavers working on it is House Bill 1170, and that is about AI content notices, so transparency. And right now we're talking about, is the basically the watermark, is it upfront, which can be stripped, or is it going to be within the metadata and then a whole bunch of things? So we have to make decisions. In the House, we got it through after many hours of debates. On the floor in the Senate, it sounds like they are much more willing to just give in to tech and weaken it and gut it, basically. But we will make that decision once we have to decide whether we take the amendment that Senator Marco Elias is introducing or not. So those are the 2 big AI bills. And then, yes, I did also introduce a high-risk AI bill. It did not pass, 2157. These are high-risk AI consequential decisions. If there's bias, then I wanted to make sure that bias, by doing it one by one, for instance, for employment decisions, if you do it one by one, then hopefully the bias doesn't go too far. But if you have AI making all those decisions and basically cutting out or rejecting people based on their race, their age, or their gender. Obviously, I wanted to make sure that AI is not used to accelerate bias, but it did not make its way out of the House. And then, if I may, just a couple more bills that I'm really looking forward to is a uh, tourism self-assessment. And actually, industry asked for this. It is a bill introduced by Representative Dave Paul, House Bill 2325. In the right after the Great Recession, we actually zeroed out our state funding for tourism marketing. And so we were the only state in 50 states with zero state tourism funding. And so it took us about 7 years to build that program back up. So we do all of $3 million funding every 2 years, but it at least opens a office. So we have continuity of efforts. And so after doing that for 8 years, the industry came and said, hey, we would like to tax ourselves. And so this bill is something that I'm really supporting. They're willing to tax themselves. They obviously would be very involved in how the money is used because they're the frontline people. They know how tourism works. And so I've worked very well in a 10 state and province manner as a co-chair of a tourism committee at the Pacific Northwest Economic Region. So I know it can be done. And so I am looking forward to it passing in the Senate as well. And there was a question I saw whether I support increased funding for public defenders, and I absolutely support funding for public defenders. And the second part of that question was that my seatmates are curtailing the Supreme Court through a constitutional amendment. I hope not, but if that bill is moving, I would really like to understand why they would want to do that, especially since Senator Solomon had been a public defender. And so please email me, Oliver, I guess, is with more details, and I will look into it much further.
Great. Thank you so much, Rep for you. That was going to be my next question to ask you, but we will move on to another one. So Seattle is one of the host cities for the upcoming World Cup. What are you doing to prepare Washington for an influx of so many tourists?
Yes, it's been a long-awaited FIFA World Cup men's soccer, World Cup. Super excited about it. Absolutely, it's out of my hands because we actually have we have committees working on it, and they're working very closely with the city of Seattle, and they are also working with many other cities. I believe there's at least 8 fan zones. There's one nearby in Olympia, Lacey, if you're in this area, in June and July. The obviously opening the light rail stations goes a long ways. The timing could not have worked better. And then connecting the East Side Light Rail with the Line 2 with Line 1, that will absolutely open it up. And I think we had a really good practice when the Seahawks parade occurred. Unfortunately, the lines were cut down in Federal Way areas, but they kind of expected that. So they got the services going again. And everyone I heard, I was in Olympia, so I wasn't able to participate, but apparently every single car was very tightly packed. So I hope you all stayed safe. But for that parade, that was a good practice, one incident run, right? And yet here we are going to be having, 6 games over 6 weeks or so. And some of the teams have already been assigned, including, I believe, 2 U.S. men's games should be in the Seattle Lumen Field. They're calling it a different name. They have to for FIFA, whatever they wanted to do. They are in control. But in the meantime, we also work with the Canadian provinces in making sure, because there'll be 8 games because they have a smaller stadium in Vancouver, 8 games there with 50-some thousand people per game. game, 6 games in Seattle with 70 some thousand. I think we can fit in 70,000 people. And so between the two countries along I-5, there'll be a lot of traffic. And so they are offering, of course, Nexus Pass and other passes. And then they're also working on pre-clearing. Let's say if a charter bus is taking a whole bunch of 50 some people at one time, each bus is taking them, or even the trains, can they pre-clear them so that as they're going over the border, they don't have to stop, but they have a special way of doing it. So there's been a lot of work groups doing that to make sure it goes as smoothly as possible. And then, of course, as we saw at the Paris Olympics, that things can go wrong. And so our emergency response teams at the state level, they've already been doing table exercises, and they stay in touch with the counties and cities. And so they are aware of and have been practicing what if something does go wrong. So that's just like what you saw when the floods occurred. They jumped into action and actually kept the damages, I think, as low as they could, sandbagging and so on. And of course, National Guard were doing something positive rather than what we saw them doing in other cities and states. So I think we're as ready as we can be. And my, I guess, tongue-in-cheek recommendation, if you were to ask me, is try to get a ticket if you can afford it, or at least go to the fan zones. Please enjoy the party that we're going to be having. And because the housing and rental cars will not be available, if you absolutely don't want to be in the middle of this very busy, exciting time, then rent out your home, or maybe let people stay at your home, maybe even let them use your car. If your insurance covers it, make sure to check in with your insurance agent. I used to be one, and get out of town. Enjoy, more peaceful areas if you are an introvert and cannot stand the excitement that we're going to have.
All right. Thank you so much. So that was our last question of the evening. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question. I'm now going to turn it back over to Representative Ryu for some closing remarks. Rep. Ryu, would you like to begin?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining me tonight. I know it's hard at dinner time, but I really enjoyed answering the questions that you posed, and absolutely willing to also do another in-person town hall, because we're done in 2.5 weeks. I can't believe it. We must be having fun. And so we will not be able to do it after May. And so sometime in most likely in April, I will absolutely try to do another chat with Cindy. So please don't be shy. Come and join us in person for an after session in-person town hall. And absolutely for people who want to not just check in and talk with me or other elected officials, please be sure to come so that you can actually find kindred souls, chat with each other, because that was the feedback I got on Saturday, that it was not just to hear from me or pose questions to me, but it was that they were able to find other people concerned about exactly the same things. And so I really look forward to being back home and seeing you again.
Wonderful. So that's all the time we have this evening. Thank you so much for attending and for submitting questions. If we did not get to your question, you can directly contact Rep. Ryu's office with your comments. Her contact information will be on the screen shortly. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great evening.